Hello, we're back again. I'm John Francois with Archangel Technologies. I'm the Senior Firearms Instructor. We left off last time on actions, and we were talking about the revolvers. So let's finish that up and move on. First, let's hit our firearm safety rules. The firearm is always loaded. Don't put your finger on the trigger until you're ready to fire. Always know your target and what's behind it, and never let the barrel point at something you're not willing to destroy. So now that we have that, let's go back to the cowboy or western type single action only revolver. And when they speak about an action, what we're talking about is what the trigger causes the firearm to do as far as firing a round. So on this one, once it's ready to go and the hammer is pulled completely back, then the firearm can fire. Once again, it made one action. It was cocked, and then when the trigger was depressed, that hammer moved forward, initiating the firing sequence to fire a bullet. So that is one action. So that's why it's called a single action only, because it cannot fire with the hammer down. It has to be manually cocked. Now, we'll move on to the modern revolvers. And so, very similar to the Western revolver, but much more modernized for ease of loading, and they have other features that the cowboy actions do not have. Number one, it's loaded, unloaded, and on safe when the cylinder's open. There is no manual safety or organic safety on the modern revolvers. Some, I'm sure they have variations that do. But for now, we're just talking about the modern, typical modern revolver. This is the Smith & Wesson. So once the cylinder is closed and the firearm is loaded, now the trigger does two things. It actually pulls the hammer back and then drops it. So that is a double action. First action is back, second action is forward. Then the trigger resets. You can also manually cock many of the modern firearms. Now, in some circumstances, especially in law enforcement, they'll do something called neutering the firearm, which means the hammer will not stay back. It will not, the sear will not lock it to the rear, because in single action, it makes the firearm much easier to function. The trigger has very little at all resistance, and we'll get into how many pounds it takes to pull a trigger in another video. But for now, let's review. You have single action only cowboy type revolver. The hammer's pulled back, and once the trigger's pulled, that's the single action. Any subsequent firing will have to be manually cocked. Then you have the modern type revolvers, where you pull the trigger and first action is back, second action is forward. So that's double action. If you want to fire the modern revolvers in single action, just like the cowboy action, you must manually cock the hammer. And then, like I said, with very little effort, it makes the round go, the firearm fire much easier. So we've covered that, and in the next video, we'll move on to the semi-automatics, and then we'll get into their actions. Just like the revolvers, you have double action and single action only semi-automatic pistols. Until next time, take care.